So this video gives a general overview of the USLCI database data submission process. In this video, I'll briefly review the submission handbook and the publishing process steps, and then run through an example of preparing a dataset for submission. I'll start by introducing the submission handbook, which can be found on the USLCI GitHub landing page. It's a very useful resource to use when working through the submission process. It provides guidelines and resources for submitting data and publishing in USLCI. It also outlines how to prepare your data for publication on the USLCI, including metadata descriptors, nomenclature, categorization, and the representation of flows and processes. There are detailed descriptions and resources on how to use OpenLCA to prepare your data and how NREL will support the publication of your work. So the handbook is divided into 4 sections. The first covers why you should publish data in USLCI, including the benefits and standards. The second details how to publish data and includes metadata and other guidance. And the final 2 sections provide frequently asked questions and resources. We'll briefly navigate to the landing page for the submission handbook just to show you what it looks like. So we can see the 4 major sections right here, table of contents, lots of useful resources. So the second section of the handbook covers publishing process steps, which I will briefly review before beginning the demonstration. So if you are trying to submit data to USLCI, the first stage is to contact the data curators to submit preliminary data sets and to set up an appraisal meeting for your submission. During this meeting, the curators will verify the fitness of your intended dataset submissions. If the dataset is deemed appropriate, then we will outline a data submission plan. After this meeting, the data submitter will need to acquire a GitHub account, which will serve as the data transfer platform between the submitter and the curator. Prior to the kickoff meeting, you will receive an invitation to the private GitHub repository created specifically for the curation of your data. Next, the submitter will need to download OpenLCA and the most recent version of USLCI in preparation of the kickoff meeting. The demo in the following slides will cover the USLCI download and import steps. The kickoff meeting will then occur in which the curator will guide you through the compilation of your data and supporting metadata in OpenLCA. Next, the data submitter will edit their unit or system processes in OpenLCA and export the processes intended for submission as a JSON LD file type and submit this to the curator via the GitHub repository. The data curator will review the submitted data sets and release review comments in GitHub. These comments can include metadata requests and resolving flow nomenclature and connectivity. The submitter will then reconcile any issues identified by the data curator and check impact assessment results to make sure that the results are realistic of the process before submission. The dataset will then be finalized and submitted to GitHub once again, and the curators will publish the dataset during the next quarterly release. These are the dates of the quarterly release, so March 31st, June 30th, September 30th, and December 31st. We will also preserve the final datasets in GitHub for you. So we've created a demonstration dataset for this presentation. So the example dataset is a potato cultivation. This dataset includes farming inputs, irrigation, and on-farm emissions. This dataset has been exported from SIGMA Pro and comes from another library, so data has been adapted and is not representative of realistic potato production. So we'll begin by importing data in the core database from the LCA Commons. We'll then map some elementary flows to the Federal Elementary Flow List. Then we will map some Technosphere flows to existing flows in USLCI. We'll go over how to designate cutoff flows, how to navigate the NAICS structure, completing metadata, importing tracing and comparing results, and then exporting as JSON LDs and submitting to a GitHub repo. Okay, so we'll go ahead and jump right into the demonstration and open up OpenLCA. So I'm using version 1.10.3 of OpenLCA. There's a newer version out right now. It essentially works the same for what we'll be doing. If you don't have OpenLCA, you can go to openlca.org and you can download it right here. There's some useful resources up here, and then there's also some helpful YouTube tutorials if you are a beginner. So we'll go back to OpenLCA, go into our navigation pane, and then we'll right click. I have a Zolko file, which we'll be using for this demonstration. So I'll go ahead and just click Restore Database. Click on the Zolko file that I want. We can see that it brought it in right here. Real quick, just to show you, if you have a different file type aside from a Zolko file, you'll want to create a new database first. I'll just name it demo. Use a local database type. Choose an empty database for now. You can see that it brought it in right here. We'll right click on the database, import, and we can see that there's a number of different file types. So we have EcoSpoled, Excel, SEMAPro CSV, and JSON LD. You can also import a Zolko file this way. So I'll just delete this old demo and we'll go into our potatoes dataset. So to start out with, we can see that this file format is not Nix compatible, so we will have to align that eventually. But for now, I will go take a look at our data set. So there's no metadata, which we'll have to work on. In our inputs and outputs, we can see that these are not currently USLCI aligned. You can see we have a mix of Technosphere flows, some farm inputs, some electricity for irrigation. We also have some water for irrigation, and then some elementary flows coming out of the system as emissions, either to air or water. And then we also have our product of potatoes. So to start out with, we will go to the commons. We will want to download the elementary flow list. This is what we will map our elementary flows to. We'll also want to download the Commons Core database. This is just the general folder structure of USLCI. And then we will want to download USLCI. Just to note, if you are new to USLCI, you can go to Browse under USLCI and you can look through the various processes that are included currently. So you can do this on the Commons, or you can do it in OpenLCI. So we'll go back to OpenLCI and we'll import the core database now. Go to import, and all of the files that we just downloaded from the Commons are JSON LD format. So we'll choose that, click on next. Sometimes it's a little slow. And get Commons, but Commons Core database. Finish. And now we can see that we have the regular Nix folder structure in here on top of our imported folder structure. So we'll want to place our intended dataset for submission in the correct folder. Easy way to do this is by going to the Nix website on the Census Bureau. We're currently using 2017 Nix codes, so we can just go ahead and search for potato. Okay, and we see we have a few different options in here. Most of these at the bottom are processed potatoes, so that we know that we want one of these potato farming groups. I think 111, 211 would be the best fit for potato farming, since there's no post-processing. So we'll go into folder 11, and then we will go into 1112. We can just go ahead and drag and drop our potatoes up there. Now we can delete these extraneous folders. They're empty. So yes to all, because there's 3 folders there. And now we have our potatoes under vegetable farming. Okay, so now we'll go ahead and map our elementary flows in our data set to FEDAFL. So FEDAFL is the Federal Elementary Flow List. All USLCI elementary flows are FEDAFL flows, but not all of FEDAFL is in USLCI. So we will go to Tools, Flow Mapping, open up a new file. We'll just name it elementary for right now. And then we'll want to choose our source and our target system. So our source system will be our current database. So you can just click this little yellow icon and it'll select the database that you're in over here. And then we'll want to choose our target system. So in this case, it will be FEDAFL, which we had previously downloaded from the Commons. So we'll choose Federal LCA Commons Elementary Flow List. Just press open, and then we will go ahead and generate our mappings. So if you have a lot of flows in your database, so let's say you have a system process or a ton of data sets that you're trying to map, this step may take a while just because OpenLCA is trying to map all the flows, Technosphere and elementary flows to FEDAFL flows. So we can see here that Technosphere flows were mapped, so we can just go ahead and delete these. And we will have to map these to USLCI Technosphere flows. So the status column gives us some different messages, but you really have to go through each mapping and ensure that it is correct. OpenLCA does its best at mapping based on flow attributes, but the mappings are not always correct, as we can see right here. So water is being mapped to RQuar in this example. So we'll want to right click and press edit. We can see our source flow up here, and can also see that the unit is in cubic meters, so we'll have to convert that. So we can just click on our target flow to change it. So just click on RQuar in this case, and we'll be able to switch it around. You can just search up here, or you can go through the menus. You know that this water is a resource since it's being used for irrigation, so we'll choose fresh water. And then we'll need to convert it from cubic meters to kilograms. We have carbon dioxide that mapped correctly. Dinitrogen monoxide is a common one that doesn't map correctly because it has another name. We'll switch that around. Sometimes this does require a little bit of research for the more uncommon chemicals that aren't mapping. So dinitrogen monoxide, nitrous oxide is equivalent. We'll just choose the general nitrous oxide air emission, kilogram to kilogram, so we're all good. The ammonia, phosphorus, and nitrate are all mapped correctly. You'll also want to make sure that your source category and target category are close to one another. So really just checking to make sure that air emissions are staying air emissions and water emissions are staying water emissions. We're all good, so we'll just click check mappings. So now we can go back to flow mapping, and we will want to apply our mappings on the database. So I'll just go ahead and choose everything since it's only our data set in here at the moment. And we'll delete replaced and unused flows. Click OK. Okay, and it looks like it works. So we have nitrous oxide now instead of dinitrogen monoxide, and this water name flow name is different. Okay, so we've mapped all of our elementary flows, so we can go ahead and map our Technosphere flows to USLCI Technosphere flows. So that would be all of the farm inputs that we have here, as well as the electricity. So to do this, I'm just going to make a copy of this database and import USLCI into the copy. Just in case any mistakes are made, we always can revert to the previous version. You can also import USLCI into the original database. It doesn't matter too much. It's a little cleaner. So we can see we have our potatoes there. So we'll go ahead and import USLCI. This is one of the JSON LDs that we downloaded from the Commons at the beginning. The National Renewable Energy Laboratory USLCI database in 2022 Q4 is the most recent one for me as I record this. So now we can see we still have the NAICS structure, but some of these folders have more data sets in them. So we still have our potatoes, and we can also see that there is another potato data set in USLCI. And during the data validation process at the beginning, when you meet with the data curators, we will look for other duplicate data sets in USLCI and determine whether we should phase out the old one or whether we should keep both of them if there's enough of a difference between the two. So we'll go ahead and go into our data set. So now we can go ahead and map our Technosphere flows. So we'll go back to Tools, Flow Mapping, open up a new file, name it Technosphere. So our source system and our target system will be the same in this case, since our data set and USLCI are all in the same database. And then for these Technosphere flows, I'm just going to map them by hand. It is difficult to automate the Technosphere flow mapping process because there are different providers, different data sets that you might have to choose from, and you might have to designate some flows as cutoff flows if there's not a good enough surrogate or proxy in USLCI. So I will go in and find our first Technosphere flow. I'll start with urea for right now. Our target flow, I know that there's a nitrogen fertilizer mix that we could use as a good surrogate. Just choose the provider, conversion's the same. If you need to do a little bit of research about USLCI surrogates, like try to find something that would fit this urea, you can either search in USLCI and OpenLCA, or you can go to the Commons and search in the USLCI. So if I didn't know that nitrogen fertilizer already existed in USLCI, I would go up to the search bar and just search for urea and just search through these so we can see that these are emissions. This one's a cutoff flow. This one's formaldehyde. This is what we're trying to replace. We have some urea cutoff flows, which are options if absolutely necessary. There's a formula using urea. So we can see that there's no good options. So I will just go ahead and search for nitrogen fertilizer since urea is a type of nitrogen fertilizer. We can look through this data set. You might have to do some sort of conversion based on the nitrogen content of the fertilizers. But for right now, we'll just assume that this would be a good proxy. We'll just go ahead and do the rest of them. So we'll do triple superphosphate. We'll go ahead and map this with the phosphorus fertilizer. We'll go into Technosphere flows, manufacturing, fertilizer category. And we just have a couple more to do. We'll do the lime next. Technosphere flows, lime. We'll use this quick lime. Choose the provider, conversion's the same, so all set. And then we also want to map the electricity to an electricity in USLCI. So go into Technosphere flows, utilities is where electricity is stored. and then 2211. And we'll just use this electricity at grid North American mix. And then we'll want to choose our provider to get the exact grid. Just going to choose this 2010 grid for the US. You see megajoules to megajoules, so we're all set. Also to note, there is another video available on mapping to the electricity baseline, which is also available on the Commons. That is useful if you are trying to run data sets with newer electricity mixes. So our other two flows, I think we have potassium fertilizer and insecticide. So I know for potassium and insecticide that we'll have to use cutoff flows because there's no good surrogates in USLCI. For potassium, I already know that there is a potassium chloride cutoff flow that we could replace this with. So I'll go ahead and find that. So we'll go to Technosphere flows, cutoff, scroll down to potassium and potassium chloride. There's no provider since it is a cutoff flow, and then the conversion's the same. Okay, so those are our Technosphere flows. We'll have to create a new Technosphere flow for the insecticide, which I will do next after we apply these on our database. We'll go ahead and apply them on the whole database and delete the old flows. Okay, so now we'll close out of these and then go back into potatoes and make sure it worked. And see now these categories have a NAICS folder structure. USLCI aligned. So now we just have our insecticide left. What I'll do is go down to the flows section, Technosphere flows, and then go into cutoff flows. And we'll just right click on cutoff flows, press new flow. So we'll just name it insecticide at plant. It's important to put that as the cutoff flow in the description. And the flow type of your product, and we'll use a mass reference. Finish. You can see that it's been created, but I like to just scroll down and make sure that it is in the correct folder before I start using it, and it is. Okay, so now I'll just go back to flow mapping really quickly. You could either go to flow mapping or you could just delete the flow in here and add it back in. I like to do flow mapping in case there's any notes or distributions included that I might miss if I'm deleting it and recreating it. Insecticide, cutoff flows. Okay. And then we'll just go ahead and apply that on our database, delete the old flow. Perfect. And there's one last thing that we need to do, which is move our reference flow into a NAICS category. So we'll want to put it in the same place that we had our process. So let's go find it. It's up here. So we have our potatoes at farm. So we'll go ahead and move that into vegetable and melon farming. And this folder, which was left over from SEMA Pro import, we can just delete. And then we'll want to delete the emissions to air and emissions to water folders and the resources folder. We should just have ecosystem services, elementary flows, and Technosphere flows in the flows folder. So I'm just going to go ahead and open up this flow. I'm going to change the name slightly just so that it aligns. Potatoes at farm. We don't need the imported from SEMA Pro anymore because it is in technically going to be in USLCI. I also like to check the flow properties just to make sure that everything looks okay. So we have mass, 1 kilogram. Out of our potatoes process and go back into it to make sure that it's saved. And it did. So now we can go ahead and get started on the metadata. So normally when I'm doing the metadata, I will split my screen and have the metadata guidance open alongside me as I walk through these fields. So the metadata guidance is split up into tabs. These tabs correlate to the tabs at the bottom of OpenLCI. We'll just run through a few of them really quickly. We'll just go ahead and start with the name field at the top. So I'll change it to potato, harvested, and then we'll do at field or at farm. So for the description, this is an important field because this is often what people quickly skim when they're trying to decide whether to use your data sets. We really recommend following a similar sentence structure to what is provided in the metadata guidance so that it's easy to sort through data sets. So I could say this cradle to farm gate unit process is for 1 kilogram of conventionally produced potatoes in Idaho, for example. This data was collected from 4 farms in 2018 and 2019. So important information like that. So we have the functional unit, technical scope, system boundary. It would be important to include like with farming, whether on-farm emissions are included, and other important properties. So we'll want to state the time here. So this is the time that the process is representative of. So in our case, it would be like 2018 to 2019. We'll want to include like this unit process is representative of farming operations of potatoes from 2018 to 2019. So any seasonality differences, you might want to note here. We'll want to include geographic region. So in this case, we put either Idaho or North America, depending on what exactly the data set is representative of. For the technology field, we'll want to include the technologies used to produce the potatoes. So maybe we would mention something about conventional farming using synthetic fertilizers and that they were mechanically harvested. Then we have these data quality fields. So there's 2 that we would like to be filled out for USLCI. So the first is the process schema. So this is just the US EPA process pedigree matrix that we'll use. And then down here, we'll enter the quality for that matrix. So there's a process review and process completeness. This schema is relatively simple to complete. The flow schema is a little bit more complex. It might require more time, but for the flow schema, the US EPA flow pedigree matrix, and then what you do is you go into the outputs field, and then in data quality, we will now have the matrix pop up here. So for each flow, we will want to include the flow reliability, temporal, geographical, and technological correlations, and data collection methods. Then we have to fill out the administration information field. This is a different section of the metadata guidance. So there's already some predefined situations that you can include here, depending on how you want your data to be used. To fill out the dataset owner, generator, documenter, what publication it was in, access and use restrictions. This is just some standard legal language that you can copy over. You can access it right here in Appendix A of metadata guidance. And then we'll also want to include the project, who funded it, any other applicable information. Modeling and validation tab might take a little bit longer. Some of this is already filled out as a carryover from CIMA Pro, but we'll want to make sure to delete these. We'll go to the modeling and validation tab. So I'll want to choose if it's a unit or a system process, the LCI method, any modeling constants, the data completeness. So what do you do with missing data if you've completed a mass balance? We'll also want to define the data selection and the data treatment, the sampling procedures, the data collection period, which overlaps with the time period and the general information. But here you can include information about secondary data, and you're not limited to just one specific time period. You can include multiple in this field. And then we'll want to include the reviewer, other evaluation sources. So these are the main 4 tabs to focus on. And then we have our parameters tab. So this is where you can define certain parameters, and then you can reference them in the amount cells in the inputs and outputs tab. One other thing to note on the parameters tab is that if you are exporting your data set from CIMA Pro, it is possible that your database parameters from CIMA Pro will be brought over into OpenLCA in this global parameters section. I know that there are some in there right now, so I don't want to show them, but the way to get rid of these is to export your data set, which we will be doing in just a second. But you want to export it as an Excel, go into the parameters tab in Excel and delete those, and then re-import it into OpenLCA. And then we have our allocation. So if there's any type of allocation needed, we can define it in here. So we can define physical, economic, or causal allocation, and you can provide allocation parameters. Social aspect tab, I don't use. I believe this is for more social LCAs, which USLCI doesn't currently include. And then we also have an impact analysis tab where if you run an impact assessment, your results will show up here. So once you have all of your metadata complete for your data set, you will go ahead and submit a draft version of your data set to the private GitHub repository that has been created for your project. Then the USLCI data curators will review it, will release any type of review comments. So normally these include flow mapping, misalignments, or missing metadata. We'll also include some guidance on how to resolve these issues if they are difficult to resolve. We can also set up a meeting and work through it together. And then after your data set has been reviewed, you will get the data set back, and what you'll want to do is run the results to ensure that they're realistic of the process. So if you've already run them in CIMA Pro or Gabby, for example, you'll want to make sure that the results are similar in OpenLCA. Of course, they won't be exactly the same if you're using a unit process, since the Technosphere flows probably vary a little bit, but it is an important step. So what we will want to do is import an impact assessment method. So for this, I will use Tracy, and we can grab Tracy from the USLCI GitHub page. So we go to docs, methods, and then there's a few different methods that are compatible with USLCI. So the first are the IPCC methods. So there's a few different IPCC global warming potentials that can be used in here. So I think there's AR 4, 5, and 6. There's the cumulative energy demand method, Recipe, and Tracy. So Tracy is the most commonly used with USLCI. So we'll go ahead and download this one to run our data set with. One thing to note with Tracy and Recipe, they don't include flows. So if you import them into your database before you have data sets in there, you will not be able to run them because there's no flows for them to go off of. You have to import them after you already have a data set with flows in your database. So we'll go ahead and go into our database and OpenLCA, import. It's another JSON LD file. Just search for it. So Tracy 2.1 JSON no flows. Okay, so now we can go back to our potatoes. We have the new changes in here. And we'll go to create product system. We'll only leave default providers since we've set them in our flow mapping. Press calculate. And then just change our target amount so it's 1 kilogram so it's easier to interpret the results. We'll go ahead and calculate, and we have Tracy as our impact assessment method. Let's finish. I normally go to impact analysis. All of these tabs are useful when interpreting results, and OpenLCA has some more information about each if needed. And we can see that our global warming potential for 1 kilogram of harvested potatoes is 0.06 kilograms of carbon dioxide equivalent. So that seems pretty realistic of a potato process, not extremely high or not extremely low. So we would be all good, but I would definitely recommend comparing this to other results if you have already run them in an outside program. Okay, so now we have our data set and we would be ready to export it as a JSON LD for our final submission. So we will go through the export process quickly. Just right click on the database, export. We'll export it as a JSON LD. You have to go through and search for your process here and check it off. So potato harvested at farm. Okay, and then we will just save it as USLCI 2023 quarter 1, and then add in the name of our data set. So this first part is just the release of USLCI that you're intending this to be released with. So for this one, the next release would be quarter 1. So save it, press finish. Okay, so now we have exported our data set as a JSON LD, and we would just submit it for the last time into the GitHub repository, and it would be included in the next quarterly release of USLCI. So this is what the private GitHub repositories look like. We have 3 folders, one for raw data, one for data and curation, and the last one is for the final data. So the JSON LD that we just exported from OpenLCA would go in here. So we just go to add file, upload files, browse for it, add it in, and then we just press commit changes. So that is the last step of submitting your data to USLCI. The data curators will reach out to you if there's any issues with this version of your file. But other than that, you should be all set. The last thing to mention is that you're welcome to contact us throughout this process. It's a very iterative process. You will probably be in touch with the data curators often if you have a more complex data set for submission. But for initial requests or any other questions about USLCI, you can reach out to us at uslci@erg.com.